person pleasing you. I'm sure many of you would have been looking forward to hear from him. But let's see what Jagannath inspires, and let's see how we can together, collectively, glorify him. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I think it's away. Yeah. जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की जय श्री प्रभुपाद की जय श्री गुरुदेव की ताइगोंग प्रेमन I'll use that, Prabhu. I'll use this. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. It's okay, Prabhu. जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी जय यशोदा नंदना जय व्रज रंजना जय यमुना तीर वनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय यमुना तीर वनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी जय श्री श्री राधा माधव की, जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की। नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। So today we are reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, and this is the first verse, text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Maya Sakta Manapartha. Maya Sakta Manapartha. Yogam Yunjan Madashrayah. Yogam Yunjan Madashrayah. Asamshayam Samargam Mam. Asamshayam Samagram Mam. Yata Nyasyasi Tachranu. Yata Nyasyasi Tachranu. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Maya Sakta Manapartha. Yogam Yunjan Madashrayah. Asamshayam Samagram Mam. Yata Nyasyasi Tachranu. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Supreme Lord said, Mai, to me, Asakta, Manaha, mind attached, Partha, O son of Pritha, Yogam, self-realization, Yunjan, practicing, Mad Ashrayaha, in consciousness of me, Krishna consciousness, Asamshayam, without doubt, Samagram, completely, Mam, me, Yatha, how, Nyasyasi, you can know, Tat, that, Shrinu, try to hear. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Please hear the purport. In this 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the nature of Krishna consciousness is fully described. Krishna is full in all opulences, and how he manifests such opulences is described herein. Also, 4 kinds of fortunate people who become attached to Krishna, and 4 kinds of unfortunate people who never take to Krishna are described in this chapter. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the living entity has been described as non-material spirit soul, capable of elevating himself to self-realization by different types of yogas. At the end of the 6th chapter, it has been clearly stated that the steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna, or in other words, Krishna consciousness, is the highest form of all yoga. By concentrating one's mind upon Krishna, one is able to know the absolute truth completely, but not otherwise. Impersonal Brahma Jyoti or localized Paramatma realization is not perfect knowledge of the absolute truth, because it is partial. Full and scientific knowledge is Krishna, and everything is revealed to the person in Krishna consciousness. In complete Krishna consciousness, one knows that Krishna is ultimate knowledge beyond any doubts. Different types of yoga are only stepping stones on the path of Krishna consciousness. One who takes directly to Krishna consciousness automatically knows about Brahma Jyoti and Paramatma in full. By practice of Krishna consciousness yoga, one can know everything in full, namely the absolute truth, the living entities, the material nature, and their manifestations with paraphernalia. One should therefore begin yoga practice as directed in the last verse of the 6th chapter. Concentration of the mind upon Krishna, the Supreme, is made possible by prescribed devotional service in 9 different forms, of which Shravanam is the first and most important. The Lord therefore says to Arjuna, Tat Shrinu, or hear from me. No one can be a greater authority than Krishna, and therefore, by hearing from him, one receives the greatest opportunity to become a perfectly Krishna conscious person. One has therefore to learn from Krishna directly or from a pure devotee of Krishna, and not from a non-devotee upstart, puffed up with academic education. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this process of understanding Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, is described in the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto as follows. Shanvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtanaha hridyantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti suhritsatam nasta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki tada rajastamo bhavaha kama lobhadayaschaye cheta eterana viddham Stitam satve prasidati evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate vidyate hridaya grantish chityante sarva samshayaha chiyante chasya karmani drishta evatmanishvare. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the signs of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of Asamshayam Samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead. Bhagavatam 1:17-21. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the signs of Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tatati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna Prabhus, Matajis. Again, for those of you who just turned up, Devakinandan Prabhu sends his apologies. And I think you would have received the message that, our dear God sister, our dear fellow devotee, Her Grace Lalita Mataji left her body this morning. And all of you would know what an exalted and powerful devotee she was. Very austere person. And till the end, we hear there were only two Matajis who were allowed at any point in time. And they were all chanting, and she was remembering Guru, Krishna. Until the end, as far as she had consciousness, she was only speaking about her spiritual master, and she was speaking about Srimad Bhagavatam. So today's verse is so relevant, and I feel that these verses don't only glorify Krishna, they also glorify his devotees. Because when we look at Krishna, we are told not to imitate. But devotees like Lalita Mataji are great inspiration for us. Because when we look at Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, they inspire us a lot, and they have to inspire us. But we may feel that we don't relate to them because they existed so long ago. And we may feel that the tenets of Bhagavatam are not applicable or they're not practical now. But these devotees come into our lives while living or while leaving. They prove to us that Bhagavatam is very practical for one who is very serious in taking the matter very seriously. So we continue with Bhagavad Gita today. So this verse, the first verse of chapter 7, Krishna tells us about two very important things. Krishna tells Arjuna that generally people who take up to even my worship, they are usually full of doubts. Those who don't take up my worship, living entities are already full of doubts. And Prabhupada tells us in one lecture that every living entity, this whole world is revolving because someone has a question and someone is looking for an answer from some person. And he says that even when the birds are chirping, the chirping of the birds are also questions that the birds are asking. Where is my food? Where is my child? And we also have similar questions. Is my child well? When is my next promotion coming? When will I get to buy my next house? Will my investments bear fruit? Every time we are simply questioning. So the living entity in the material world, whether he be human being or an animal, simply we are questioning and we are looking for answers. And until and unless these doubts are resolved, the living entity will know no peace. These doubts are the cause of fear in this material world. We don't know what is coming up next. This anticipation is always there about situations, about circumstances, about people. This doubt is always there. And Krishna tells us that there are two ways to come free from these doubts. And one of them is not to look for the answers. It's very nice. Krishna doesn't say that all your doubts, now you have to look for solutions or answers to each and every one of them. As we always hear, not every battle is meant to be fought, and not every doubt is actually meant to be cleared. And this is what is mentioned in Bhagavatam as Vidyate Hridaya Granthis. Vidyate Hridaya Granthis means this heart of ours is full of knots. And these knots are actually the doubts. And we would know that if something is tied very tightly, we would want someone to come and release the knots. Then we get a bit of relief. So everyone is expecting that someone will come and untie the knot. Or we are expecting ourselves to untie the knot of doubt. But here, Krishna is telling us that it doesn't work that way. Krishna is telling Arjuna that all your knots, don't look for separate answers. Ask one question, get one answer to all the different doubts. He tells Arjuna that an intelligent man will only ask one question and he will try to find out the ultimate answer. Because he tells Arjuna in many words, not only this verse, he will go on to say that the moment we keep hankering after answers, after answers, after answers, we stop living. We only survive. Like in the animal kingdom, the animals survive, they don't live. And in modern education, we are told survival of the fittest. But Krishna says, no. Arjuna, you are not meant to survive in this world. You are meant to live your life. So he says, stop with all the different answers that you're looking for and do two things. He tells him that attach your mind on me. This is the conclusion of Bhakti Yoga. This is the conclusion of spiritual life. He says, attach your mind. So there must be attachment, and the mind must be ours. And the mind must become attached to Krishna. This point is very simple, but it's very difficult to follow. We are all crowded here, hankering after this one point. We wake up in the morning, we chant our rounds, we read Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, we have friendly dealings with devotees, only chasing after this one point, to have our minds attached to Krishna. And he says, and perform yoga in full consciousness of me. In that way, all the doubts will become, the knots will become untied. So one may ask, why is it so important to rest our mind and to become attentive to Krishna? In 618 of Bhagavad Gita, in the purport, Prabhupada writes, unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. It's a very important point. He says, unless our minds are attached to Krishna's lotus feet, and this is exactly today's point, any other transcendental engagement we are trying to take up, it will not become practical. In our own devotional lives, we question ourselves. Why is it there is no consistency? Why is it that I'm trying, but sometimes I cannot progress, or I let myself down, I let Krishna down? So there are some discrepancies. And why these things are not practical is because the mind is not resting on Krishna's lotus feet. And Prabhupada translates that famous verse, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, in that purport. And he translates very nicely, King Ambarish first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then one after another, he engaged in all other services, which he will list down. So Ambarish Maharaj was one of those exclusive devotees who engaged in all limbs of devotional service. But Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, the first starting point was that his mind was attached to Krishna. And this is the central point of devotional life. When we are young, this point may not seem very relevant to us because we still are relevant. Devotees still speak to us, our family is still with us, we still get services, We are told to lead services. We have so many different engagements. So this point may not be very relevant. It's okay. I'm still doing. I'm doing. And people are still there. So the impetus may not be coming from Krishna's lotus feet. It may simply be coming from activities. But as the age catches up, when we become irrelevant, and it's very easy to become irrelevant in this material world, when people don't look at us, they don't come to us for advice, we are not managing, we're not carrying tables, because our limbs don't allow us. Then at that point in time, this point of attachment of our mind to Krishna's lotus feet will shine bright. But at that point in time, if we were never attached to Krishna's lotus feet, then only frustration comes out. Then only the rules and regulations remain. There is no taste for devotional service. We may not be able to sit in a room and spend time with Bhagavatam. We may not be able to chant Krishna's holy names. And that is the only thing we can do when age catches up with us. There's nothing else we can do. Lalita Mataji left this morning, and the only thing she could do, because she had taste for Srimad Bhagavatam, and she was peaceful. That kind of opportunity and fortune comes to those who have spent their life trying to attach their mind to the instructions of the spiritual master. This is a very, very subtle point, but it is the seminal point in devotional service. Because devotees are meant to be happy. They are not meant to become frustrated now, yesterday, or even in future. And this is the point that must be there. Spiritual life should never become stale. And it can only happen when we follow the footsteps of Ambarish Maharaj, that he attached his mind to Krishna's lotus feet. So you may ask me, or you may ask yourself, yeah, you're sitting here, you're saying all this, right? But this is the most difficult thing to do. In this day and age, those days we had weapons of mass destruction. But now we have weapons of mass distraction. We have many weapons like this. And 30 seconds, 5 seconds, we cannot sit in one place. Once I asked my spiritual master, how would you know that if one is progressing in devotional service? And I was really expecting a far-out answer, something to do with Bhagavatam, And he told me, if you can sit in one place, then you are advancing in devotional service. That's all. And I told Maharaj, but we have to run around for service. He said, no. He said, this running around, don't say it's service. It is because your mind cannot rest. And you're looking for all these activities to simply pacify your distracted mind. It was a very important point that struck me. Sometimes we do many things, but we don't realize that sitting down with Bhagavatam, sitting down chanting our 16 rounds, is the most important activity that we can ever do. Prabhupada writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, of all the instructions that is given by the spiritual master, the instruction to chant the 16 rounds is most essential, and it should be prioritized. And that also includes us spending time having our appointments with Krishna. Sometimes we are rushing, do the arati, do the abhishek, come to center, we keep doing. But then we take a step back and we ask, what are we rushing for? Krishna is there, we should spend time with him. So the distracted mind, it comes out in very subtle and gross ways. And this is mentioned in 1.3.44 of Srimad Bhagavatam. So here, Prabhupada writes, we speak about devotional activities. And Prabhupada takes one example of hearing. He says, simple hearing is not all. So usually we are told, just do the devotional service. And we say hearing is the most important. But here Prabhupada writes, simple hearing is not all. One must realize the text with proper attention. This is the fixing of the mind on Krishna's lotus feet. The word nivishta means that Sutta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. See, how nice. He didn't read. He was drinking the juice of Srimad Bhagavatam through his ears. That is the real process of receiving Bhagavatam. One should hear with rapt attention, again, the word attention, fixing our mind, from the real person. And then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. And then he goes on to say, which is very relevant to today's verse, no one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. So now we know, when we are distracted, we are looking out for so many other activities, it's because the mind has dirt. And he says, no one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. So we may think, oh, now I need to sit down, I need to start thinking how to control my mind. But here Prabhupada says, mind can only be controlled when the actions become pure. And what are those actions? No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and meeting. And this is what we do in material world. We sleep, we eat, we fear, we defend, that is, and we mate. And if these four things cannot be purified, then Prabhupada writes that this is polished animalism. And polished animalism will always give us the distracted mind, because the actions are not pure. So the gist of it is why the living entities are distracted is because the eating, sleeping, and meeting have become complicated. The living entity needs this. One cannot leave these four things. It is impossible. No matter what ashram you belong to, whether you are grahastha, sannyas, these four things, maybe some things you will give up in certain ashrams, but at least one or two, the living entity will have to touch. So the mind gets distracted because these four things become complicated. We are inclined to these four things more than we are meant to be inclined towards them. If you see, if you leave a sack of rice, eating, if you leave a sack of rice outside Strangun Road, you'll see the pigeons come. And the pigeons will come, they will pick up whatever they need, and they will fly off. And I will finish the class and I'll go out. But I will go with my plastic bags. I will take and I will start filling and filling and filling and filling. So my concept of eating, sleeping, and mating is more advanced than the animal. Because the advancement of the material world is how complicated you can make your life to be. That is what we are taught. If something is simple, it cannot be advanced. We must make it complicated. But here, Bhagavatam is telling us that the less we are distracted, the more the fabric of our life actually improves. And why are these distractions there? It is mentioned in 223 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ataha kavir namasuya vadartha syada pramato vyavasaya buddhi siddhe anyatarte nayate tatatra parishramam tatra samikshamanaha. There, Shukadev Goswami tells us, very nice verse. For this reason, the enlightened person should endeavor only for the minimum necessities of life, and this is the key point, while in the world of names. So Shukadev Goswami qualifies this world as simply a world of names. An example can be given of the homes that we live in. We have HDB, we have condominium, we have semi-detached house, we have terrace house, we have good class bungalows, so many things. But if you were to be in the vicinity when they are building these houses, they will only use water, they will use cement, they will heat something, and they will put things together. So everything in this material world is made up of the five elements. But the moment we attach a name to it, then we lose our mind. A Toyota car is there, right? Same aluminium, wheel, everything is there. And then there is a Mercedes. Same aluminium, same wheel. If you drive that, you'll get home. If you drive the Toyota, you'll get home. If you drive the Mercedes, you'll get to Mars. No, you only get home, right? So the point here is the names, they distract our mind. Someone has given it the name and someone has given importance to it. But the function is actually the same. So Shukadev Goswami has diagnosed this problem very nicely. The distraction is not because of the matter that is there. The distraction is because the names that we have given it. We talk about anxiety, we talk about depression. These are all real things. But sometimes rather than looking for solution, we get distracted by the names. Oh, depression, anxiety, there must be something to it. We have to do something about it. So everything has a name that distracts us. But a devotee is able to look past the name and look at something for what it is and how it is used to improve the fabric of our life. And I would request you to read that purport of 223. We don't have time to read it now, but the purport, Prabhupada extensively tells us on how these names distract us. So the permutations of the 5 elements and the names that are attached to it, they give us the distracted life. And the gross ones, sometimes we may be able to give up, but the subtle ones are very difficult to give up. Until and unless our mind is attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, these names will continue to distract us, will continue. If you look at social media, for an example, when you scroll, it's all full of names. And our mind is boggled by these names. And there are examples of Narada Muni, of a devotee who showed us how not to be distracted by names. After his mother passed on, Narada Muni's mother in his previous life, he was the son of a maidservant. And when she passed on, because she was bitten by a serpent, he was attached to the Bhaktivedantas, who were the pure devotees. And he took their instruction to heart and he started to walk towards the north. And as he walked towards the north, he tells us his story. He says, after my departure, I passed through many flourishing metropolises, towns, villages, animal farms, mines, agricultural lands, valleys, flower gardens, nursery gardens, and natural forests. So, what Narada Muni was simply doing, he was just walking past Orchard Road. He was walking past Tampines. He was walking past Sengkang, right? Because when you look at this, these places are made up of all these things. So he walked past, he saw the factories, he saw the gardens, he saw the metropolises, the shopping centers, so many other things. And Prabhupada writes in his purport of 1611, that verse, man's activities in agriculture, mining, farming, industries, gardening, etc. were all on the same scale as they are now. Even previous to the present creation, and the same activities will remain as they are, even in the next creation. After many hundreds of millions of years, one creation is started by the law of nature, and the history of the universe repeats itself practically in the same way. So Prabhupada is telling us that there have been many Orchard Roads before. There have been many Googles before. There have been many banks before. When they keep repeating. And then he writes, the mundane wranglers waste time with archaeological excavations without searching into the vital necessities of life. After getting an impetus in spiritual life, Sri Narada Muni, even though a mere child, did not waste time for a single moment with economic development, although he passed towns and villages, mines and industries. He continually went on to progressive spiritual emancipation. This is the point. Narada Muni, after getting the impetus, he was not distracted, even though there were distractions in front of him. How did this become practical? Because his mind was attached at the lotus feet of Krishna, just like Ambarish Maharaj. And that's why he was able to leave his distracted mind. And he was not distracted, and he was conscious of Krishna. These are the 2 points that we are looking at today. And in 113.17, Narada Muni's impetus, that word impetus, Prabhupada writes in 113.17. And this is an instruction that he is giving all of us. He says, therefore, any comfort or life or any material happiness, therefore, any comfort of life or any material happiness which does not warrant an eternal life is but illusion for the living being. Such a nice point he's making. Any comfort that doesn't warrant an eternal life or does not warrant an eternal life is but illusion for the eternal living being. One who understands this factually is learned, and such a learned man can sacrifice any amount of material happiness to achieve the desired goal known as Brahma Sukham, or absolute happiness. This is what Prabhupada is saying. So this comfort that Prabhupada is writing here are the distractions. We look for these distractions because they give us some apparent comfort in life. But Prabhupada is telling here that if one can see past, push a little through the mercy of a pure devotee, and take up more to activities that warrant an eternal life, then one can touch Brahma Sukham. Brahma Sukham means that happiness that is everlasting. Brahma Saukyam, Tvanantam. That means it does not leave when you see certain things or you don't see certain things. When some people are in our lives, we're happy. Some people are not, we are upset. Or when some people are there, we are upset. When they leave, we become happy. So he does not take his happiness and give it to the external. He is satisfied because he perseveres on the path of only engaging in activities that warrant an eternal life and that can bring him Brahma Sukham. And Brahma Sukham is attained by a devotee or a living entity who touches Sukham through Brahma. Brahma means spirit. It's Krishna. And the minimal thing that we should touch in the material world, if we want to touch Brahma, is the mode of goodness. The person who enjoys himself in the mode of goodness is sustainably happy. His happiness will bring him peace. The person who enjoys his happiness in the modes of passion and ignorance, his happiness will only bring him disturbance. This is very subtle point. Happiness are of different kinds. Krishna tells us in Bhagavad Gita. So one who touches the happiness within the mode of goodness, he will be completely peaceful. These days again, technological advancement, and this morning we were just discussing, the propaganda is to be happy very quickly. Very quickly. In pandemic, we read from the papers that people's wealth has grown manifold. Very quickly. Why? Because we want instant happiness. But Krishna warns us that instant gratification, instant happiness is not sustainable for the individual living entity and for the greater society. It cannot be. Once instant happiness is there, someone is instantly suffering. Happiness that is touched through the mode of goodness, that brings us towards Krishna. And without such happiness, there cannot be peace in life. And if there's no peace in life, then how to put our mind on Krishna's lotus feet? So Bhagavad Gita is very practical. It doesn't just tell us, okay, just put your mind on Krishna. It tells us, Krishna tells us how to lead a peaceful life. So if we are able to delay the gratification, if we are able to dig deeper, if we are able to do activities that warrant an eternal life, that is how the living entity declutters his life. We do decluttering for our cupboards, but living entity's life also needs decluttering. And this decluttering happens when we touch happiness through the mode of goodness. And there are very nice examples. There are 3 examples of this who have done this. Because we may think, again, this is not practical. Because Prabhupada is seeing telling us that, don't go towards economic development. So are we meant to leave our jobs? Are we meant to leave our families? And the promotion that's coming tomorrow, we go to our boss and say, it's okay. Give it to my colleague. Krishna never said that. But how do we apply this practically? Here, Yudhisthira Maharaj, when the Pandavas won the Kurukshetra battle, and Yudhisthira Maharaj took the reins of Hastinapur and the rest of the world, his opulence, Bhagavatam describes as being uncommon. Uncommon means that even Indra was envious of his opulence. That is how rich he was. And Bhagavatam tells us in 1:12:6, Kim te kama sura sparha. Sparha means aspiration. The demigods were aspiring to be like him. Kim te kama sura sparha. But Yudhisthira Maharaj was Mukunda Manasaha. Mukunda Manasaha. He was not aspiring after his own wealth. He was Mukunda Manasaha. Manasaha, again, the mind. His mind was completely attached, and Prabhupada uses the word absorbed in Krishna. And this is the instruction Bhagavatam is telling us. Adi Jarur Mudam Ragya Shuditasya Yate Tare. He was only hungry after Krishna's lotus feet. Yate Tare means other things. He touched it. He did not artificially say that now this opulence, I'm going to the forest. No. He enjoyed his opulence, but he enjoyed it in the mode of goodness. And that is why when the time came, he was only waiting for Parikshit. He knew once he comes, I'm dropping this. This is the advancement of a devotee. And this in Bhagavatam is given in 2 words. Virakto Raktavat. Virakto means one who is detached. Raktavat means one who is very attached. Devotee is Virakto Raktavat. That means he is not attached to anything. But when he does his activities, he will seem as though he is very attached to it. This is known as Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam, the art of activities, the art of doing karma. A living entity through experience and through the blessings of a pure devotee who is able to do Virakto Raktavat, then the royal path to devotional life is actually open to him, even while living within this material world. This is the high practicality of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Because Arjuna was a practical man. He was Virakto. He did not want to fight. But he had to Raktavat. He had to fight. Yudhisthira Maharaj also had that. Bhishma Dev, he was Raktavat, very attached. Duryodhan came to him and said that, you are cheating, right? You are siding with them. And he got insulted, Kshatriya, Raktavat, very attached. He said, tomorrow all 5 heads will fall. At least Arjuna will fall. But the moment Krishna came in front of him, Raktavat disappeared. Only Virakto was there. He dropped everything. It's okay what I promised Duryodhana. It's okay, I'm a great Kshatriya. My Lord, you are here. What else do I need? Virakto Raktavat. Because these Mahajans are always on that path, they are subtly able to give us that experience of Mukunda Manasaha. That one's mind is constantly attached on the lotus feet of Krishna. So we looked at Yudhisthira Maharaj, we looked at Bhishma Dev, and lastly, in conclusion, we'll quickly look at the example of this one nice pastime of Akrura going to Krishna and Balaram and calling them to Mathura, to Kamsa, to get slaughtered. Right? That's what Akrura was doing. Kamsa told Akrura that you now go to Krishna and Balaram and you tell them that now come to Mathura. And Akrura knew that what Kamsa's intent was. But this whole pastime will give us the practical sight of how devotees are, their minds are attached to Krishna, and they are fully conscious of Krishna. So when Akrura was going to invite, we'll move a little quickly. When Akrura was going to invite Krishna and Balaram, he knew that I have to bring them back because Kamsa was meant to kill them. And Akrura, literal translation, is one who is cruel, right? Or one who is not cruel, not cruel. Krura means Akrura, one who is not cruel, right? But he was sent for something he was not, to do something he was not meant for, to be cruel. And in material life, many times we are faced with this situation. Devotees, many times we say, right, I'm in a certain job, I'm in a certain situation. It is not meant to be devotional. It doesn't enhance my spiritual life. But if you look at Bhagavatam, none of the devotees ever complained about their current situation. They never said, because of this, I could not remember Krishna. Just imagine, we will never be sent to, take the deities out or do something to them. But Akrura, being a devotee, was told, you bring them because I want to kill them. But Akrura did his duty. He still went, he obeyed Kamsa. But Krishna book and Bhagavatam tells us, he did it without envy and malice in his heart. He did not envy Krishna. He had no malice towards Krishna. And he shows us the royal road on how to perform duties. Because when there's no envy and when there's no malice in the heart, then there's only Krishna in the heart. That is the concept of attachment, samagram, that we are discussing about today. So what Akrura did, that Prabhupada tells us in his lectures, is that Akrura left his heart with Krishna. And then he was doing everything else. His heart was always protected. But with his intelligence, with his mind, with his other faculties, he was actually continuing with his duties. But because his heart was sold to Krishna, he was always attached to Krishna, he was always conscious of him. And that's why even though Kamsa told him, bring Krishna and Balaram, he went very happily. Because his mind was completely peaceful. And this is what Krishna is telling us, that he had no doubt in his mind. He had no doubt that Kamsa was a plaything in Krishna's hands. When we have no doubt of Krishna's supremacy, it means that we have no doubt about his omnipotence and his omnipresence. Krishna may not be in front of us directly. Now he is. But his omnipresence, one must recognize. And his omnipotence, because he is the remote cause of everything that happens. Everything that happens. So by understanding that, Akrura had no doubt. He did his duty, but his mind was attached on Krishna. So as he was traveling, Akrura felt that he was not fit to see Krishna. This point is very important if a devotee wants to remember Krishna all the time. When a devotee feels, I am fit, why am I not getting this service? I am so fit to do this service. Immediately Krishna drops off and we come, I am fit. But the moment we understand that even playing a kartal in the center is a great privilege. Oh, someone has told me to play kartal. It is not different from Krishna. Akrura was feeling this. I'm not fit to see Krishna. I'm not fit to do anything. But Krishna is giving me that privilege. When that sense of gratitude sinks into our heart, constantly we remember Krishna. When one always thinks that I'm fit, then what happens is Krishna is completely removed from the mind. So the quality of humility, of always thinking that he was unqualified, reminded him of Krishna, because he always had to depend on Krishna's mercy for everything. And as he was traveling, Akrura wasn't going to the orchard roads as we spoke about, like Narada Muni. He didn't do anything. He sat on his chariot. And what was he doing? He was always thinking of Krishna. He was speaking about Krishna. He had no other intent, not even to kill Krishna, which is what Kamsa's intent was. So Akrura's mind was absorbed in Krishna. And in 113.11, Prabhupada writes in one purport, he says, either remaining at home or leaving home, the real qualification of a pure devotee is to become wrapped in the thought of Krishna favorably. So he tells us that the qualification of a devotee is not in how much he has or how much he doesn't have. The qualification is if one can have rapt attention on Krishna. Is the living entity's mind safe from the material wranglings? Is he able to peacefully sit down in one place and spend time with Krishna? Or does the living entity look towards what he likes and considers that to be service? Sometimes we may sit for kirtan and we feel that kirtan is done only when a certain singer sings. We may come to honor prasadam and we may feel that only if this devotee cooks, I would partake, or everyone would come to eat. Or only when this devotee speaks, then I would come to hear. This is the materially distracted mind. But Maya Devi will tell, it's okay, no? It's Krishna. But for a devotee, there is no such thing as what I want. Anything that warrants an eternal life, the devotee does that. Anything that does not warrant an eternal life, even if it can look spiritual, a devotee naturally, he drops it. And that's why his mind is always attached to Krishna. And when Akrura reached Vrindavan, Akrura was rolling in the sand of Vrindavan. This is another important point that he tells us, that Akrura respected every limb of devotional service, every artifact, every paraphernalia. With respect. Respect means there is attention. It's just sand. But he felt that this is Krishna himself. So attachment to Krishna is there sustainably, not only when we look at the deity, not only when we come to the center, but attachment to Krishna is there when a living entity is able to give attention to that which is very close to him, that he sees every day. Familiarity breeds contempt. But for a devotee, nothing breeds contempt. Because what happens is he sees the spirit and not the matter. So even within the four corners of his walls, he is spiritually enlivened. Because his family life or his home life is not stale. It is brimming with spirit. Why? Because he gives attention to everything. He doesn't divorce his work. For students, the students don't divorce their studies from devotional service. Nothing is divorced from Krishna. And so their minds are not stormed. Oh, how come, I have to work so long? How come I have to study so hard? Many times our minds are stormed. And then we have many questions how to balance. The balance is keeping our mind on Krishna. That is the balance. The balance is not in the external. And Akrura proved this, that anything he saw reminded him of Krishna. And the moment he went and he saw Krishna and Balaram, and the intent of Kamsa was to kill them. And Krishna and Balaram, being the supreme lords, knew why Akrura had come. But what did Krishna and Balaram do? They ran to Akrura. They brought him and they worshipped Akrura. Krishna is known as Bhavagrahi Janardana. Even though he came for something inimical, Krishna knew what was in his heart. This is the lesson Akrura is teaching us. That externally we can be flinging our hands, flinging our legs, jumping, doing so many things. But Krishna comes straight for the heart. Akrura was there to kill, apparently through Kamsa. But if Krishna can pick up that intent, this is the quality of Krishna that Bhagavatam tells us. So how much importance we must give to protect the heart. This is what Akrura tells us. And when Akrura went there, Akrura was not duplicitous. Akrura did not tell Krishna and Balaram, no, you come. We are trying to serve you. Kamsa will give you everything for Kamsa to slaughter them. Akrura was not duplicitous. He revealed his heart. even though they knew. This is another great quality of a devotee who wants to control his mind. There's no duplicity in his mind. What is inside is outside. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur tells us, real bhajan begins when the inside and the outside is the same. I've always wanted to hang that quote at my door. Because sometimes when we leave, we become someone else. And when we come in to our homes, we become someone else. But when we read that quote at the door, then we are reminded that if we want to be attached to Krishna, then that quality of duplicity should be given up. And the last point in this pastime are the Gopis. Again, I'm fast forwarding. The moment they heard that Krishna was going to be taken away from them, the Gopis were very busy. Bhagavatam tells us. They were very busy. We are also very busy. We have our job, we have our family, we have so many distractions that we are apparently busy with. But the moment they heard Krishna was leaving, the Gopis left everything. And they immediately started to run after Krishna. Virakto Raktavat. That means they were very attached. But what was in their heart came when provocation came. Our strength is tested when there's provocation in our lives. What is the material that we are made up of? And the Gopis were made up of the material called Krishna. Nothing else. They had nothing in their hearts. But that doesn't mean they were shirkers. They did, but the moment they felt Krishna was leaving, they left everything. So here, Prabhupada and our acharyas tell us that daily a devotee's life should be like that. That there must be some time that the devotee must gather enough courage, strength and energy to drop everything, to sit in one corner and to sit and to spend time with Krishna. It requires a lot of courage. Because we will think, who's going to call us? What is the next post on social media? What's happening around the world? So we really have to have courage to just sit down and spend time with Krishna. And when that happens, the mind is actually set straight. And for Gopis, Akrura was not Akrura. He was cruel because he was taking Krishna away from them. So for Gopis, even a pleasant thing is not pleasant when it is not connected with Krishna. Many things are pleasant in front of our eyes that distracts us. But for them, if it is divorced of Krishna, they did not want to have anything to do with it. Even Akrura. Just imagine, this is the point of saturation of concentration. It's not with just the beats, it's not with external activity. These things will take us there. But the Gopis are showing us at a practical level what actually happens. And when they try to speak to others, don't let Krishna leave, nothing happened. The last part of the pastime, at least for this part, the Gopis themselves go out. And here they teach us that eventually all living entities will have to fly their own airplanes. That means the individual will have to put in his own effort after gathering pace on the ground. But once the plane takes off, then the plane will be on its own. No one can say that, oh, the pilot did not fly, this passenger was not right, or the birds will not complain because my partner did not flap, I stopped flapping. So the Gopis, they were so desirous of Krishna. And this is what the pure mind brings about. Two things, attached mind and being conscious of Krishna. This brings about our own individuality, where even that individuality is united with Krishna. And all this happens in the last two words of today's verse. Tat Shrinu. If one wants to remember Krishna, one has to hear. Remember we read the purport 1.3.44? No one can give rep attention who is not pure in mind. And then we went through eating, sleeping, mating and defending. So we didn't read the next part of that purport. Prabhupada writes in 1344, after that part we read, but somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person, at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Sri Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. So this is the concession that is given to us, that one who is desirous of hearing, who can be patient, who can sit down, who can set all distractions away and simply hear, then Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo will definitely happen. Because the mind has selected the right object. We're all trying to select objects. We're all trying to ask questions and have answers. But this is the ultimate question. What is the content and what is the subject that we should partake of? And this in Bhagavad Gita is known as Avyabha. What is that verse? I forget. Sorry, Prabhu. Mamchayo avyabhicharena. Mamchayo avyabhicharena. Right? The chaste mind. When the mind takes shelter of everything and anything, the mind becomes unchaste. And when the mind becomes unchaste, the mind knows no peace. So when the mind builds up confidence in anything other than the lotus feet of Krishna, it becomes polluted. And that's where we have impressions on the mind. And distractions continue. We will walk into the center week in, week out. We'll continue chanting our rounds, but then we will still be scratching our heads. What happened? And this will catch us when our limbs cannot move any longer. And that is why I mentioned in the start, the way Lalita Mataji left today is an example of what this verse is telling us about. She couldn't move. She was almost unconscious. And it will happen to all of us at one point in time. What age, we don't know. Can be young, can be old. But one who endeavors now to be only attached to Krishna alone by hearing about him, then Krishna will bless that living entity to be attached to his lotus feet through the mind, to be conscious of him and not to have any doubts in his life. And when we have no doubts in our life, we do not have fear. And just imagine when we don't have fear in our life. It's blissful. And even in this life, we are availed of the spiritual world. So thank you very much, Prabhus, Matajis, for hearing very patiently. Are there any questions, any comments anyone wants to bring up? If there is nothing, Dinavatsala Prabhu, can we do Gaur Arati? Okay. So thank you, Prabhus, Matajis, for coming together to hear Bhagavad Gita. Tomorrow's Bhagavatam continues at 7:30 in the morning. So if you're available, if you're free, you can come to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Gaur Premanande. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Prabhu, I can't hear you. 20th Feb, right? Yeah. Sorry, Prabhu's Mataji, just one quick announcement. There is a webinar that is happening on the 20th of February. Navaguru Prabhu just informed us that this webinar is practical tips on parenting. So I think this is a topic that storms many of our minds. And his name, Prabhu, Avatari Leela Prabhu. Avatari Leela Prabhu. He's quite a popular devotee and he speaks very nicely on practical topics. So he has very kindly extended himself and he's reached out to Navaguru Prabhu. And Navaguru Prabhu is now collecting names to register for the event. But the only request Navaguru Prabhu has is those who register should attend the event because he's our guest and we want to see as many devotees as possible to attend. And it's a very practical seminar. So you can take back a lot of tips, and there will be follow-up sessions that Prabhu is also organizing. So this is 20th of Feb. If you can give him your names, register, he will then send you all the link for that session. Okay. So once you register your name, he will add you to a WhatsApp group, and communication on the webinar will be posted there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Who's singing? Sorry? No, you sing. Ram Chaitanya Prabhu, do you want to sing Gura?
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatari Gauravani Shiva Jayo Jayo Gaurasande Arati Kosho Shiva Jayo Shiva Jayo Jayo Gaurasande Arati Kosho Shiva Jayo Jagamanalo Jagamanalo Paramara बहु कोटि चंद्रजीनी वदना करे शिव शिवा शुक नारदा गदा शिव शिवा शुक Shiva Shiva Ashuka Narada Devadanga Shiva Shiva Dharara Sampada Jayo Jayo Jagamana Krishna Chaitanya Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोदर्शत श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन बीबीटी बीआई फाउंडर आचार्य जगत गुरु शील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोदर्शत श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर शील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य शील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपिका श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरी गोवर्धन की जय। ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर नवद्वीप धाम की जय। पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। गंगामय जमुनामय की जय। भक्ति देवी तुलसी देवी की जय। षड गोस्वामी प्रभुगण की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हर ग्रेस ललिता माता जी की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Gaur Haribo.
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhuji, the kartal, I won't be able to play with you. Thank you. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlada Ladadaine. Hiranyakashipu Vakshaham. Silakankalaye. Ito nasimha parato nasimha. Yato yato yami tato nasimha. Nasimha hridaye nasimha. Narasimha madem sharanam prapade. Tavakara kamalavare nakha adbhuta singha. Dalita hiranyakashipu tanu vrenga keshavadita narahari rupa jaya jagadish hare jaya jagadish hare jaya jagadish hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की भक्त शिरोमणि कैलाश महाराज की
Prabhuji, the mic.